A lot of people feel that the Indiana Jones series is just 3 movies, and this is not something that used to bother me. I mean, I watched The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull in theaters back in 2008, and I was very disappointed and almost insulted. But now I'm analyzing the movie, looking at 3 good things about it and 3 bad things, and I wonder whether it's fair to say that this is actually a terrible movie. It's flawed, of course, but is it so bad that it shouldn't be a part of the Indiana Jones series? Well, I hope to answer that by looking at the good and the bad in Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And to start things off, I would say for an adventure movie starring my favorite character in cinematic history, the first hour of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is quite good. It's not great or anything, but I think the Area 51 prologue, the Marshall College set piece, Indy and Mutt exploring Oriano's cradle, and the Russian camp, those all have the right mix of adventure, campiness, and character dynamics, all updated for a new generation. And yes, there are certainly bad elements early on, but they're minor enough for me to still enjoy myself. And a lot of that comes down to just how well paced the first hour of the movie is, and how much it feels like an Indiana Jones movie. Like the prologue has all the classic Indy elements, like him being a smartass to the bad guys.
Drop dead. I'm sorry. I meant drop dead comrade.
And of course we get an action scene where things just keep escalating from set piece to set piece. It does strain credibility a bit too much with how casually Indy's able to make some of these escapes, but it's a fun reintroduction. And it's surpassed by the awesome motorcycle chase where Mutt and Indy are chased by Russians through Marshall College, and it includes this amazing bit of creativity, and it caps off with this scene that nails that classic goofy humor that the series is known for.
Excuse me, Dr. Jones?
Yes?
I just had a question on Hargrove's normative culture model.
You want to be a good archaeologist, you gotta get out of the library!
It's extremely cheesy, but it's also incredibly in line with the original trilogy. And that goes for how the main story is handled in the first half of this movie. There's a good hook to the search for the Crystal Skull with some very interesting lore. We have a creepy tomb raiding sequence that harkens back to the original trilogy, and I love how much the movie plays up Indy as something of an archaeological investigator.
Follow the lines that only the gods can read that lead to Oriana's cradle.
Ox didn't mean Oriana's birthplace. The cradle has another meaning in Mayan. Literally, it means resting place.
Yeah, this is Indy in his professional element, and I don't think it's perfect by any means. I think the exposition can rely too much on Indy just solving things while the audience can barely process what the clues are. But I think this stuff does a good job of stirring up that sense of adventure that Indiana Jones fans crave. Replacing Nazis with Russians was a good idea as it brings more personal stakes for Indy, who's under suspicion for being a Russian spy. And I know a lot of people don't like the aliens. It doesn't bother me when they are introduced midway through the film by Big Bad Irina Spalko. The only issue I have here is that the exposition in the tent starts to drag a bit. But Crystal Skull re-energizes things by choosing this moment to bring back a fan favorite in the best way possible.
Indiana Jones.
Now this is a bit too meta, and the snake gag after this is overly cutesy, but all combined, I think the pieces to this movie work up to this point. We've had action, we've had drama, we've got a solid new character, and they held off on bringing back an old fan favorite until the middle of the movie. I mean, they've shown restraint. Well, maybe restraint is not the right word. Yeah, that is not restraint. That is the creative team caving in to the most basest of impulses. I was looking forward to what the Paramount logo gag would be here after the fun quirkiness of the original trilogy. And they used a CGI gopher. Why? I don't know. I mean, it distracts from the actual fun opening of the movie, and it foreshadows Crystal Skull's biggest weakness, that this movie pointlessly devolves into an avalanche of crappy CGI. Like, I could accept the stupid Paramount gag because so much of the prologue is pretty great in its direction and use of practical effects, with just a smattering of CGI here or there. But then when we see the gophers a second time, I started to realize that Spielberg and Lucas might have lost their touch. Even the nuking the fridge part, like, I actually don't mind that scene that much. Yes, it's incredibly dumb, but it's dumb in a very specific Indiana Jones-ish way. Like, it's got that fun aspect where Indy is just in over his head and frantically scrambling to get out of it. And yeah, it's a bit too much CGI, it's incredibly fake, but I don't mind it when it's brief and pays off a fun setup. What ruins the scene, though, is when he pops out of that fridge, who is waiting for him? The gophers. Now you might wonder if 15 seconds of gopher screen time is worth it to complain like this, but they are irrelevant and gratuitous. It's a slippery slope to just use CGI willy-nilly, which is how we end up with this travesty of an action scene in the South American jungle. The truck convoy sequence is so disappointing. It's an absolute abomination. It combines terrible CGI, really fake-looking lighting, and just set pieces that seem to be based in no reality whatsoever. Like, this is more like a comic book than a movie, and a really bad comic book at that. Like, prior Indiana Jones movies wove humor into their action scenes, but there was still a sense of danger to them. They felt grounded in reality. This scene in Crystal Skull tries to go for the same tone, but does anyone worry about these characters in this scene? No, the CGI is so excessive and so obviously fake that you never feel like the characters are in danger. Stuff is just happening. Things are just flying at the screen left and right. And just like the gophers, so much of it's unnecessary because a lot of the scene is actually practical effects and stunt work, but you can barely tell because the CGI and lighting in the scene makes it look like post-processed hell. It's a scene that revels in excess for no reason other than they could.
Preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Like, why have this moment where Spalko's car runs over Indy's car at the end of the scene? There's a similar moment in Jurassic Park, but practical effects make that sequence feel dangerous and survivable. This moment in Crystal Skull doesn't feel dangerous and looks impossible to survive. That's what's so embarrassing for me as an Indiana Jones fan, because how could a series that had such brilliant set pieces like these have devolved so badly into this? This scene is heartbreaking to me because I've watched the original trilogy with my father many times, and I could never watch this movie with him because I don't think I could look him in the eye when this scene occurs. And it doesn't help that this might be the single worst piece of John Williams music. Then again, he probably scored it appropriately when he realized what he was watching.
That is one big pile of shit.
Using all these Jurassic Park clips may be a bit indulgent, but it's giving me ideas on how to improve Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
That is one big pile of shit.
And the good thing about that line is it's broadly applicable.
That is one big pile of shit.
And we didn't need this pile of shit. We already got scorpions early on to give us our Indiana Jones creepy crawly fix, and I would have been happy with just that because there was restraint with the CGI there. But then why do we need this ant scene? It is better than the truck chase in the jungle, but the CGI is still bad. It's still distracting. I still don't feel like anyone is in danger, and I barely notice how awesome a fight this is for an older Harrison Ford because it ends with this image. This is Crystal Skull at its least skilled. It's just brimming with excess. Like, the movie would be so much more effective if it cut down on the spectacle. Like, why have 3 waterfalls? 1 or 2 would have been way more believable and impactful. And I know this because Redditor MyThat'sWit posted a Crystal Skull fan re-edit of the movie, and the waterfall scene plays so much better. You can all check out that fan edit at the link that I put in the video's description. There's a lot of great work there, like the gophers are mostly gone, and Irina Spalko's death is way better without the goofy alien zoom in. And speaking of that ending, let's talk some of its issues. As usual, any and all of the cool practical effects are overpowered by an overuse of CGI. Like, compare how this sequence feels to how the one in the alien throne room feels. One actually makes it seem like Indy and company are in danger, the other is nonsensical with a comically bad last-second escape for Indy. The overuse of CGI, particularly in the back half of this movie, ends up overshadowing the good in Crystal Skull. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, there is a lot to appreciate in this movie. Holding all of it together, even during the worst of the CGI, is Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, who is strength number 2. He's older, but when he's ordering around Russian goons, the energy in the movie just crackles.
Compass. I need a compass. You know, north, south, east.
West.
Despite Indy seemingly having forgotten the 4th cardinal direction, he's still the same gruff, roguish, intelligent, quippy, and most importantly, fun character he was when we last saw him 19 years prior. And because he insisted on doing many of his own stunts, it allows us to see that age 66 Harrison Ford could still deliver a believable and iconic action hero.
You're a teacher?
Part-time.
And I feel like Crystal Skull gives Indy a lot of development in terms of his relationship with Mutt. He's a bit more mellow and prone to go with the flow than he would have been in prior movies.
You quit school?
Oh yeah, sure, tons of them. You got a problem with that?
No. Not if that's what you love doing. Don't let anybody tell you different.
And I think this is the funniest Indiana Jones the character has ever been.
Grab the snake! I'm calling it that! It's a snake, what do you want me to call it? Hey, rope! What? Hey, grab the rope!
Now the humor does start to wear thin once it's revealed that Mutt is Indy's son, but I genuinely like Mutt. I used to hate this character, like a lot of people. There's plenty of controversy around Shia LaBeouf, and he is part of the single worst scene in Indiana Jones history. Sorry, I just couldn't watch Mutt swinging on those vines one more time. So rather than take the 10 seconds to put that clip in here, I spent like 45 minutes editing that soup joke, so that's where my life has gone. But yeah, I like Mutt. I think Shia and Harrison Ford have good chemistry. I like how their relationship develops over the course of the movie, and I think he's a solid mid-tier sidekick in the pantheon of Indiana Jones sidekicks. He's no Raiders Marion, but he's a hell of a lot better than Skull Marion.
Shut up. That's my mother you're talking about.
But that plays into my feelings on the ending of this movie. I think the final shot nicely wraps up a theme that this movie was playing with.
To have reached the age where life stops giving us things and starts taking them away.
So that ending changes things for Indy. But is it earned? Not really. He and Marion bicker and make cutesy looks at each other, but nothing here would naturally lead these two to the altar other than their shared nostalgia for the 80s. There isn't room in the movie for that because Crystal Skull's second weakness is it tries to do too much. There's too much plot, too many themes, too many relationships to develop, and too many goddamn new characters that certain things end up just getting shortchanged. Like, after the prologue, there's all of this drama about Indy being wrongfully accused of being a Soviet spy or sympathizer, him being fired from Marshall College, and it feels like the movie's gonna tackle these themes head on. But after Mutt is introduced, this theme is just dropped, and all we get is Indy killing Russians, finding out he's a baby daddy, and having a close encounter. And apparently this allows him and Charlie to get reinstated and for Indy to be off of the government's radar? Why? I don't know, but don't get me wrong, I don't want a super serious Indiana Jones movie where Indy is moping about how the world has left him behind and he has to fight to find new meaning as the world changes around him. But still, Crystal Skull set this stuff up. It should at least try to address it, but unfortunately, I think Marion Ravenwood's reintroduction hijacks the movie. I think she's good in the Russian camp, but after that, she kinda sucks.
Stop, you're gonna go off the cliff.
That's the idea!
Bad idea, give it away, Mom.
Trust me!
Maybe Indy thinks that Marion is suicidal and a risk to her own health, and that's why he got married to her, to make sure she doesn't hurt herself? I don't know. But it's clear that by bringing Marion back, Spielberg, Lucas, and the writers were going to get her and Indy back together, hell or high water. And that means less time to develop any new character who is not named Mutt. Like Marshall College's Dean, who I've already forgotten his name, he's barely anything in this movie. Mac is a train wreck of a character that I have to save for later. And then Irina Spalko, the main villain, she has a memorable look, and Cate Blanchett delivers a pretty hammy performance that I think I could have appreciated more if she was given more to do than say the same thing over and over.
Because I know things. I know them before anyone else.
To peer across the world and know the enemy's secrets. Imagine what they could tell us.
I appreciate them going all in on her motivations, but that's all there is to her. She is a complete cartoon villain, and her dialogue gets old very quickly. And at the end, when she dies in what is supposed to be a similar fashion to Belloc or Donovan, it falls flat, not just because of terrible CGI, which there is, but also it's comical how badly she reads a room. Because as people are being sucked up into interdimensional vortexes right next to her, she's all like,
I want to know. I want to know.
And then it takes a CGI alien mean mugging her for her to realize now is probably not the time. This is such a stupid ending, and I know I'm mixing up two weaknesses here, the CGI and the characters, but trying something new. I'm also going to try something new with this video here. I'm going to ask for your likes and subscriptions in the middle of the video rather than the end. Hey, I don't think that's a very good idea. I want to know if I get more subscribers doing this. Enough! Enough! Hey, I was just trying to get a better look. I guess it's just me now. Okay. So he was talking about characters, and Harold Oxley is another new one who is old friends with Indy and Marion. There's a lot we learn about him from Mutt, and it sounds like he could be an interesting character. But when we do meet him, his mind has been warped by the Crystal Skull, and so one of the new characters is basically insane for the entire time we know him, and we don't care because we've never met this guy. And now with all these themes, new characters, and confusing Oxley riddles, the movie has to work overdrive in explaining the plot, and it gets very convoluted very quickly. And I don't mean complex or that the story is too out there. I don't even mind the aliens, because the Indiana Jones series has always had supernatural elements. Aliens feel at home here. But I didn't need a massive exposition dump to tie up the story, which is what the finale in the temple is. Oh, look at this shadow. This is matching this picture, even though this reveal was already done like an hour ago in the Russian camp for the audience. The climax is a slog and just a bunch of nonsensical buzzwords.
Where did they go? Space?
Not into space. Into the space between spaces.
Sounds like somewhere where we could just throw away our garbage. So let's just put Mac there. He's the worst character in the series, and he's weakness number 3 in this movie. He's introduced as an old friend of Indy's, but before we get a chance to care, he stabs Indy in the back for money. Then when he shows up an hour later, he is a character with much more depth.
It's just about money, isn't it?
A gigantic pile of money.
So this guy's characterizations are paper thin, and then the movie decides to make him a double agent and he's really on Indy's side, and his character traits go from paper thin to whatever the hell this is. So they decided to make a character with less of an arc than Willie Scott and more annoying than Willie Scott, and then try to put all of these dramatic twists with this character and just hoped and prayed that we would care. And I am sorry, I don't care at all. And then the movie clumsily makes him stab Indy in the back again.
Sorry, Jonesy.
So what are you, a triple agent?
So this is a clearly awful, half-baked character who has no redeemable traits, he has not a single good line in the movie, and he does nothing interesting as a villain. But the worst thing this movie does with Mac is try to make the audience feel something during his death.
Jonesy! I'm gonna be alright.
What the f does that mean? Like, he's gonna be alright? He's being sucked into an interdimensional vortex. And why did he wink at the camera? And did he just, like, realize the errors of his ways now and he's redeemed now? And is that why the movie's trying to give him some dignity? But if it's trying to give him dignity, then why do they remove all that dignity immediately by killing him like this? I don't know what else to say about Mac. I feel like I've developed his character more than Spielberg did in this movie. So let's just get the hell off of him and go on to strength number 3. The camera work in this movie is phenomenal. Spielberg did not do a good job directing this movie. That's pretty apparent. But on a technical level, he and cinematographer Janusz Kaminski are incredible. Like, everyone remembers the Gophers, but no one remembers how well the camera is incorporated into the race between the Russians and the kids during the opening credits. It's so smooth. And Indy's warehouse escape has these grand, sweeping shots that have this majestic flow to them. Like, I just love the way the camera moves in this movie. It absolutely races with the action. Even the horrid jungle scene has some fantastic camera work. Like, you probably didn't notice this Spielberg wonder because it was hidden behind all the horrible CGI and the terrible lighting. But look at this thing. So much is happening on screen. So many characters, so many props, and the camera is just tracking everything. And honestly, it feels like the improvements in technology and the improvements in Spielberg's craft since The Last Crusade really show when you look at the camera work in this movie. It's sublime. It's just hidden behind all the garbage, which sucks because maybe the most unfair thing for the Crystal Skull is how much the bad stuff overshadows the good. How the CGI obscures the amazing practical stunt work and camera moves. How Mutt swinging with a bunch of monkeys hides the fact that he's a pretty cool new character. And how beneath it all, Harrison Ford is brilliant bringing Indiana Jones back to life. I think he's just as good as in the original trilogy. And that last reason is why I consider this part of the Indiana Jones series. Everything else, you know, is hit or miss. But Indiana Jones is Indiana Jones in this movie. And if Indiana Jones is Indiana Jones, then I insist it's Indiana Jones the movie. No, it's Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. But that's an Indiana Jones movie, and I will die on that hill.
That is one big pile of shit.
I will not die on that hill.